fundraising services. I will say, if you see an awkward look on my face, it's that I'm not involved in fundraising. I don't know who our big supporters are. Sometimes if I'm doing a story, I will ask that department, because I think, I just want to disclose it. If my story mentions a supporter of OPB. But I'm really insulated from that world. I also understand that members make my job possible, so I come to things like this to communicate sort of what we do in news and why we do it. But just to draw a line under the fact that I want to do news for you whether or not you give money to OPB. It's not my bad. Yeah, Amy.
I was at that picket, and I'm curious, are you, now that you're upper management, because you've done so great, you got promoted, are you now a union member, or did you have to, like, I don't know, admin isn't covered? Are you protected anymore?
I am definitively lower management
Okay,
right now.
good.
But I am the bureau chief. Yeah, OPB also has on we have some employees of OPB are already unionized through SEIU. They are not in the newsroom in the content department. But recently, I think it was last year, our OPB recognized the content employees announcement that they want to join a SAG-AFTRA union, and those contract negotiations are ongoing. I'm not personally in that union because I supervise people.
So,
Yeah.
but congratulations anyway.
Yeah.
Along those lines, how best to support those workers that want to be heard by a very large news organization? I mean, canceling the subscriptions is always the best way to do so.
Yeah.
So what other...
On the bulletin question, yeah, I think you raised a point of as of last year, Carpenter Media, because they bought up Eastern Oregonian's parent company, and then also Pamplin Papers in the Portland area. I don't know the magic bullet of how to. I subscribe. I think that's a simple step. I subscribe to the bulletin. Yeah. How do you
support those workers when the magazine about...
Could you repeat the question?
Report about
Wondering how to support the station.
I mean, one way, I can't specifically necessarily give advice of like what to do in this situation, but I would say generally what will help local journalists who are down in the trenches doing a really hard job for low pay, because they love it, because they're genuinely curious people and they want to practice that trade in their community, is to make sure that when you like something you read and you appreciate it, send positive feedback too. I think we have a bias, all of us do. I'm much more likely to, I don't, for instance, tend to leave reviews unless it's something awful, like there was a roach in my food or something. And I think the same bias comes in news gatherings. So just making sure that managers hear those appreciations. And yeah, subscribing, continue to be willing to, if you can, for the organizations that are by subscriptions, understand that there's so much information, maybe people's expectations have eroded a little bit around what they should pay for.
How do you choose your topic?
I don't have like a rubric, but I often am thinking about like how many people are affected. Will anyone else tell this story? Is this story reportable? Can I verify, like you say, it includes claims or an allegation or whistleblowing of some kind? Can I back that up with multiple sources? Because sometimes we might believe something someone is telling us, but we can't prove it or back it up with enough supporting evidence to put our credibility on the line. So I think about in those factors, and then also like creativity and joy, and like, is this interesting? Does it reflect where I live, distinct from other places? I think like the Santa Claus story I mentioned of what a unique thing for Bend to support, especially in at that time and even now political climate where it's pretty routine to hear people say transphobic things and cast it as a political statement. So yeah, it's kind of a broad calculus, and there's certainly a lot of judgment and discretion that goes into it. I also like to just hear what people think is important. A big part of our role is having a broad intelligence network where we talk to people from all different backgrounds, a bunch of communities across Oregon, and listen to what they're concerned about and what they want to see reported.
I wonder if you've heard anything at all about creating a local news station here in Bend, maybe through OSU, because I frankly get so tired of hearing that 20 long list of phone stations that are out of Portland, listen to this, and this. It would really be nice to have our own channel.
Oh, you mean like on OPB to have a different stream that's tailored to Bend?
The Bend station, people working here are reporting from the Bend station.
Yeah. And what I want to give,
It would be also then filled more with events in Bend or in Redmond or in Monument or wherever, more local, maybe tidbits of what's going on instead of what's happening in Portland.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hear that. Our newsroom is definitely Portland-based. I'm the first editor to be based east of the Cascades. And I wanna give a hat tip to community stations like KPOV and KLCC and Central Oregon Daily and KEND, The Source, who we partner with on reporting. There are actors, I guess, in that kind of ecosystem, and I think certainly it's a resource question at the end of the day. To create a stream of OPB that is specialized for Central and Eastern Oregon would require a lot of staffing, and over the last 10 years, OPB has really laser focused on its journalism. And I think, I don't know, some of you may prefer our television or other bigger programs. We do our journalism, of course, on television and do some amazing work with documentary. But through all of our platforms that focus on journalism.
The adrenaline is sky high. My heart rate is sky high. As soon as you put the suit on, your helmet on.
There's something in your pocket that's like this plane.
Is that me?
I think it is. It sounds exciting, whatever it is.
Oh, it is, but
I'm locked in.
it's all about the court and our AG and all the stuff at the Supreme Court.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. I read it.
An entrance, yes. So anyway, I hear that, and it's a question of resources. I hope that 10 years down the line, that's a conversation that we're having. Where I worked in Georgia did do that, and I will say in that case, the result was that you had similar position to mine, but they spent most of their time reading event announcements and being on the air as a personality rather than doing, pre-produced journalism. And then also that time would get filled with high school football games. Because they created the stream, but they didn't have the resources to support that fully specialized product. But I hope as our membership grows, I know our CEO, who's you're into the job, relatively new to OPB, she has communicated very clearly that regional coverage is a priority, and that we're not backing down, despite the funding challenges.
What are your priorities for reporting this year? What are you looking at? It's going to be top of mind.
So in the Bureau, we have Catherine Sarah Martinez, another reporter who really focuses on Bend city government and housing, making sure that the diverse communities in Central Oregon are reflected. I personally have been, I guess I would call it kind of a hellhole. I've been in deep on an investigation for a while that I expect to come out in the next 1 to 3 months. And it was in my my role, I really balance like editing and working with people, being kind of, in a sense, a gatekeeper for information, for tips that come in of like, oh, this city council's doing this, or this county government's doing that, and making those decisions about what to cover. And then working on an investigation that's been ongoing about water use in Central Oregon. We pulled a state data set off the shelf that kind of existed in an undigestible format, but had some really interesting things to tell people about how much water plants consume. I know it sounds really dry. It's an investigation about grass growing. It basically is, but I expect that to come out in the next few months. And I've been partnered with ProPublica, which is a national nonprofit news organization that works with OPB on major projects like timber wars and salmon wars, and this is an iteration of that. So I was hoping it would be out by the time I got here today, just so we could talk about it. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you for what you're doing. I'm kind of excited about the freelance reporters. It seems like a low cost possibility to cover a lot of areas in rural Oregon. Can you enhance or enlighten us on what your goal is with the freelance perspective?
Yeah, so we have some funding set aside specifically to serve rural communities. And part of that is supporting a freelance network that is in its infancy. And the idea is we're looking to work with reporters who have ties to communities outside of where we have beat reporters. And many times reporters that have ties with organizations or former media organizations in those communities to tell stories that otherwise might not get told. And also there's kind of a training element to it. A lot of the people I work with maybe have done writing or photography, but they haven't done audio, or they've done audio, but they haven't done photography. So there's a lot of working with people one-on-one to build capacity so that if they don't become a full-time journalist at OPB, they're gaining training and tools in addition to telling stories that we want to share with our audience. So that is an effort that started last year, and I've got about half a dozen folks that I'm working with. It's a slow process to build capacity and build those skills, and it's not a substitute for beat reporting. It just isn't. The importance of having full-time journalists who make a living wage, have health benefits, and are really rooted to their communities just can't be underscored, and it's not going to be fixed by freelancing. But this is, in my view, a way, I don't want to call it a Band-Aid, don't tell my CEO I call it a Band-Aid, but it is a way to keep, supporting that journalism and having stories we wouldn't otherwise get, and supporting journalists who maybe don't have the option to be the full-time staff reporter at the local newspaper that doesn't exist anymore. But it's not a solution long-term.
So you spoke earlier about bias in news reporting and news gathering. So NPR and OPB are virtually synonymous with the average person. When they tune on 91.3 all day long, they're going to listen to NPR and OPB. NPR has been accused of having a liberal bias, and i.e. OPB in the same boat. What are you doing to give us a balanced red and blue picture?
Well, I do want to draw a line between NPR and OPB, because NPR is an organization with I think a few thousand employees based primarily in Washington, D.C. And OPB pays quite a bit of money to NPR in order to carry its drive time flagship programming, Morning Edition, and All Things Considered. When I, as OPB's Bend, Oregon reporter, have a story of national significance, I go to NPR and I sell it to them, and they pay me separately. So I understand why people link. We give this experience, especially in broadcast, of a synthesized organization, but in fact we're managed by completely different people, we're based in completely different places, and OPB, I can't, behind the scenes, we complain about NPR a lot, not because they're biased, but because it's just, you know, collaborations between organizations can be time consuming and difficult, and you have distinct cultures. I think it's an interesting question. I think it when you have an organization based in Portland that is doing the work that they're doing to represent the rest of Oregon, it's an imperfect but noble goal. So we're working on that, you know, to make sure that we don't just that we do stories outside of the major metro areas that aren't stereotypical, that are reflective of the depth and the nuance here. I do think part of I guess I would just, as a longtime journalist, every day I feel like I would be like, okay, be skeptical, but not too skeptical. I'm a little skeptical of the political pulling information and eroding critical information from the landscape. So that's like the skepticism I see. I hope the reaction to federal funding being pulled, whether you believe OPB should get any federal funding, that's fine too. You know, part of it is just, it's a moment of change and we're gonna have to figure out how to change. What I don't want people to do is to react as though that's one side of the story and OPB and NPR are the other side of the story. We have always been journalists doing our best to inform, engage, and entertain. And I feel personally kind of pulled into that political dialectic that's really outside of why I get up in the morning and what I do. I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe I should say no. I don't think that we're biased. I do think as a human being, of course I have biases, but as a trained journalist, when I go to write a story and think about how it's put together, I have a skill of objectivity. And what I don't want to see is like an overcompensation to try and prove something that was false to begin with.
Well, I guess really the underlying premise of my question is equality.
Equality.
Showing both sides equal.
Right. And I think, as I was at an event last week, I was like, only stories only have two sides. I mean, especially as a community, like focusing on community news, every good story does have a conflict or a tension in it. And you want to make sure that the relevant sides of that tension are included in the story. I think it's a mistake to put everything through the lens of red versus blue. And I really try to keep that in my work as a community journalist, because so much of the issues that we care most about, like water, like our public services, like how our governments are run, local governments that make sure, you know, when you turn on the tap it works, or that you don't total your car in a pothole. I want those things to continue to be reported in a way that's reflective of like the nuance and the messiness of what it actually means to live in a community and not entrench yourself in a political ideology. Yes, you.
Do you think that his question about having local people do more stories with her argument, I've seen that people who can't get their local story out will glob on to a social media concept and end up taking sides because there's nobody doing anything locally. A good example is the gentleman in La Pine who started a petition to oust the governor. And I don't know how far that story went here, because La Pine is just down the road from Bend. You know, it carries some weight. Where can we get more local stories out so that people can talk to their neighbors and discuss, you know, issues that pertain to all of us? That's and you kind of answered it a little bit there with you know, with what you're doing, but how do we bring the local paper? There used to be a paper here called the Bend Bugle. How many people remember the Bend Bugle? Mr. Lartner, who's with 2021, that was a baby. And I've only been here 25 years. You know, I'm just saying that those things, you know, where people read them. We don't have that anymore. You know? So I think paying some of these people or getting a Venmo account that you guys could support for local people to do stories. I've been telling KPOV to do more than just their half-hour, 9 o'clock fluff stories of what's going on, to really, you know, have people out there. And now with these things, God, you know, every one of us.
We need tote bags, make newspapers sexy again. Let's do it.
The name of the newspaper?
Oh, that was a joke.
I know.
You know, I will say it is expensive to do news. It can be expensive to do news well, consistently. OPB is now the only media organization in the state with an in-house legal team.
Yeah.
You would think, this probably makes me sound, they call me a free vote flyer. And it's because I do a lot of public records requests. So, you know, if you want information from a government about what they're doing in your name, you ask them. It's called a request, but it's really enshrined into law that they have to give it to you. And differing public bodies have different cultures and fluency in what the law actually says, and so we often end up in legal fights that shouldn't be legal fights, but that's not how negotiations work. You can't just go to people and be like, but I'm actually right, and then they just step down.
Well, there's that emotional thing with the news that we all have, depending on what we've heard, you know, what comes by our way, you know.
Yeah.
I think there's solutions out there. I don't know if people are just willing to, you know, pay for it. One thing that people need to know that I think was President Madison gave free coverage to all the abolitionists, you know, the slave issues. And every little town had their own little paper that they could send out, and the postman would distribute it. So this is, you know our history about the media, it's been supported by the government before. That's what I'm saying.
In the back.
No, I think he's been waiting.
Oh, yeah.
That's Amy.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for what you do. Specific question, and then a more general question. Are you exploring either on the news side or the operations side anything to help KWSO as they continue to navigate a very tricky future up there on the reservation? And then secondly, are there other specific gaps or areas that you're particularly worried about, whether it's the evaporation of local newsrooms, local coverage, et cetera? Like what worries you most about what isn't being covered right now?
KWSO, for those that don't know, is the community station in Warm Springs. It's a beautiful station, and their partners of OPB, they carry our midday talk program, Think Out Loud, as well as doing their own original programming and recording. And they really started as an acknowledgement that in that expanse of Oregon, there were no other sources of broadcast information. They're very hard hit by the federal funding cuts. You may have read about them on OPB and the New York Times, even profiled as a case study, and how funding cut will have very disproportionate and inequitable impacts across rural America. In terms of what OPB does to support them, they are part of the Northwest News Network that OPB is a leader in, which means that all of the stations, most of the stations, all of them in the Pacific Northwest, the stations in Ashland, Eugene, OPB in Portland, KUOW in Seattle, KWSO, whenever we do news, we put it into a shared thing where everyone can play it and take the story free of charge. And so we support KWSO from a programming perspective in that way. I recently went there, did a training station to aspiring, both emerging and more experienced journalists there, get some training on doing daily news and how to turn something around quickly, writing for the air, and So we do partner with them. There are also journalists there that are part of our freelance network and have contributed broadcast materials to OPB. But in terms of the bigger question, I think that's a question for Sue Matters, the station manager at KWSO. I wish again that I had solutions. What I just have for now is genuine optimism, and as somebody who is in the middle of the organization doing the job, doing the journalism work, I can earnestly communicate that I get a lot of support to do what I do, regardless of whether or not it might make a powerful person angry, or without any consideration for if that person is an underwriter or that kind of thing. So I take a lot of hope in that. I'm a true believer, and that kind of obnoxious idealism has found a home for me for a long time, and I think it will continue.
I really, OPB first edition, OPB first look,
Yeah.
and frequently there are stories there for us in Central Oregon.
Yeah, so we do, to your point, I should have been quicker with this earlier. Doing a whole broadcast stream for a region would be a big undertaking, but we do customize, depending on if you subscribe, and I recommend you do, to our online newsletter. If you are subscribing from Central Oregon, they do customize it to make sure that you don't miss the most important stories about your region. Any more questions?
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what resources are available to contribute to furthering journalism? For example, Forge, and one I just heard about the other day for the first time, Lay It Out Foundation, both of which are local.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Forge is an effort that started with EO Media, and they do a lot of great work training young journalists. And of course, Lay It Out Foundation is coming from the publisher of The Source Weekly. But I'm not super versed in all of their operations. I think that would be a good one for maybe a panel discussion. But I certainly have worked with them. We work with The Source with our freelance network. They'll co-publish stories, and if we're working on something of mutual interest, we'll get together and have it all coming out. Another partner that we pull in that's not quite as local as Investigate West. They have a reporter working on Central and Eastern Oregon stories that I collaborate with closely, even though they're from a different organization.
I can speak to the Forge. My daughter is in that internship, and basically they're high school students who are getting trained to do journalism, and they have an online publication that's very affordable for them to publish, and they learn media literacy through News Literacy Project and the Technology course, which you all could take if you were interested in improving your media literacy. It's called Technology. Other than that, I don't know.
How do you decide which county commission meetings to report?
Would you ask that question again, please?
How does OPB or how does your office decide which county commission meetings, Deschutes County commission meetings you attend and report on?
So this, you're actually, maybe not on purpose, you're getting at a heart of a major kind of turning point or conflict for us, is that when this bureau started, it was really under the presumption that we have a daily newspaper with beat reporters covering the ins and outs, every turn of the screw of local government. Now that we don't have that, it's not like we've magically gotten a bunch more reporters to backfill it, so it's a existential dilemma in certain stories and coverage areas of when does the very local story need to be a statewide OPB story. Traditionally, I approached it of, does this resonate with a fuller statewide audience? Does it show something that's either unique about Central Oregon or unique about Central Oregon's response to a shared problem? And now that calculation does differ. If it's really important locally and I don't think anyone else is going to cover it, we will get in there. Well, thank you all so much for listening to me. You can find me, it's eCureton@opb.org, or just Google Emily OPB Ben. Feel free to send me an email. Reach out anytime with story ideas. Some of the best tips that come out of meeting people at events like this. Thank you.